So you bring home a whole bunch of seedlings, you plant them out into your garden, and then what? You have no idea how to maintain it or what to do after planting out. In today's video, I'm going to share with you these 7 things that you need to know before starting your garden. Let's go. Hey guys, welcome back to Mini Urban Farm, a channel about gardening and homesteading in the suburbs. Today I will be sharing with you exactly what you need to know before starting your garden to make sure that you have a successful garden every season. Now, before we jump into that, I do have an entire checklist, an urban vegetable gardening checklist. So if you are new to gardening and trying to set up your own urban vegetable garden, you can go ahead and grab that. I will leave that link in the description below. Don't forget to check that out. And without further ado, let's get into number 1, which is to know your hardiness zone. So knowing your hardiness zone is essential to making sure that you can actually grow a garden that produces well in your area. Not all plants do well in all parts of the world, or all parts of the state even. My hardiness zone is zone 9B. I'm in Central Florida, and that could be different than somebody in South Florida versus North Florida. It really does vary. The way that you would check this is to go online and go ahead and search your zip code plus hardiness zone. You'll be able to see what zone you're in and then the plants that grow well in that area. Now, a common misconception is that if you go into your garden center, if you go and look for seedlings or plants to buy at your local center, they would have plants that grow well in your area. But I'm here to tell you that that is not always true. For the most part, it's pretty accurate. However, I have walked in there and seen things like apples and pears and plums growing in this area, varieties that I know do not thrive in Central Florida. So knowing your hardiness zone is essential because you can be buying something that just dies in your garden and it's not your fault at all. So make sure that you are growing plants that work well in your hardiness zone. Alright, so the next thing that you need to know in order to start your garden is to know where exactly the light is in your garden. I happen to know that right here next to me there's this big tree. Therefore, this area right behind me is really shaded out for the majority of the day. So here I planted my arugula, I planted my kale, my mustard greens, things that grow really well in the shade. And the same thing applies to this area behind me. I know that it gets mostly sun throughout the day. Therefore, I planted out things that require full sun or that do really well in full sun. Things like beans and tomatoes and other crops that I know would benefit from the amount of sunlight that this area gets. The way that you would check this is to simply watch your garden. Observe how much light you are getting and just plant out what gets the amount of light that that area provides. Alright, so this next one is super important, and it is the time that you are willing to dedicate to this garden. So hear me out on this one. When you first jump into a new project or hobby or whatever it is, a new interest of any sort, you are the most excited you're going to ever be about it most of the time, right? When I first started getting into gardening, I had this idea that I was going to come home from work and wake up early and do all the things in the garden all of the time, and that is not realistic. As much as I love gardening, I know that life gets in the way, and I only have X amount of hours to spend in the garden every day or every week or every year or month or whatever it is. So make sure that you have enough time for the type of garden that you're planning to grow. It doesn't take a long time to garden. I do most of my gardening in about 2 or 3 hours every week. Even when I had a bigger garden, I was only spending 3 or 4 hours a week in the garden, which is not a lot for being able to produce all of my own vegetables for the season. However, you're still going to be spending time in the garden, and you need to make sure that you can carve out that time, because if you do not do that, then your garden will not survive. Now, a good way to get around this is to set up systems that will actually take care of your garden for you. Things like my irrigation timer, for instance. I have a sprinkler set up with this irrigation timer behind me, and it will basically water the plants for me. That way, I do not have to water manually every single day. I don't have to wake up early. I don't have to remember to water. The plants are getting the amount of water that they need, and I can adjust it accordingly. So the next thing that you need to know is that different plants mature at different times of the year, and they take different times to maturity. So tomatoes, for instance, produce about 90 days after first planting that seed. In order to get harvest in the amount of time that I have in this growing season, I know that for me at least, I need to start them somewhere around February or early March in order to beat the heat in the middle of June, because my tomatoes will fry if they are not in a covered area or in the shade or something like that. So you need to know how much time it takes to mature for the plants that you actually have growing in your garden. Radishes, salad greens, things like that take a very short amount of time with only a few weeks. If that's all you have in your short little window because you've planted things out late, then those are great options to consider. However, if you are trying to plant out things that really like the heat, things like tomatoes, things like okra and beans and that sort of thing, and you only have 30 days until your frost date, then you're probably not going to be able to get a harvest, and those plants will end up dying before you put food on your table. So know how long those plants take maturity, back it up by however long you have left in your growing season, and plant out accordingly. That generally means that you have to do a little bit of research for the beginning of your growing season and the end of your growing season before you start planting things out and before you start bringing home seedlings. Now, again, the garden center will sell seedlings all year round. They will sell lettuce in the middle of August. Here in Central Florida, that will not grow, all right? Unless you're taking extreme measures to be able to grow that, you probably will not be eating lettuce homegrown from the garden in the middle of summer here in Zone 9B. So make sure you know your hardiness zone, and make sure you know how long those plants take to mature and when you're able to get a harvest out of them. That way you can do some basic math and actually get your harvest. The next thing that you are going to need to know is that you are going to have to feed your garden. Simply bringing home seedlings and transplants and planting out seeds is not enough. So on a regular basis, I use some sort of plant food or fertilizer or something. I use a lot of worm castings. I use a lot of compost, homemade compost, anything that can provide organic material to your garden and nutrients to your garden. You're going to have to do that on a regular basis. That does involve some garden maintenance, and you will have to do this continuously in order to feed your plants so that they don't die, and so that you actually get fruits and vegetables out of your garden at the end of the season. Alright, so the next thing, I'm going to come in close to this little cucumber plant here, which is to know the signs of pest and disease for your plants. So this, you can see, has gotten some leaf miner damage. The leaf is also turning a little bit brown, and it has some holes in it. And overall, this plant is like a light green color. Now take these cucumber plants over here. They are way darker in color. They don't have pest damage. They have a little bit of browning, but overall they are doing pretty well, and they're also much taller. You can see these ones are much taller than this little one over here. Now the reason for the coloring in this plant is more than likely due to the fact that we have this giant tree here that shades out the majority of the area. I do have my salad greens planted in this same area, and I just stuck this little cucumber here just because I had the trellising space. But clearly this is not thriving, not nearly as well as the ones on that side of the garden that have a lot more sun. So as you can see, it is really important to know the signs of pest, disease, and nutrient deficiencies, because without that, you're not going to be able to take the preventative steps in order to get rid of those pests and disease early on. Now, I did notice the signs of leaf miners coming into my garden as I do the majority of the seasons here. It is very hot, and leaf miners are just something that I deal with on a regular basis. Therefore, I use a lot of neem oil and organic pest control methods preventatively throughout the season to make sure that when those leaf miners are coming in, they are not being able to spread throughout my entire garden. And knowing the signs to look for is really important in order to prevent those things. Alright, so the last thing that you need to know before starting your garden is that you're going to kill seedlings, alright? This is inevitable. There are going to be times where things just don't survive. This is a little tomato plant that I left in the greenhouse significantly too long. I completely forgot it was there, and the result is that this is now going to go into compost. So there are going to be times where things just don't go as planned, and that's part of gardening. That's part of life. Plants die, and then you just try again, and you do better, and you remember the things that didn't work and the things that went well. Alright, so don't be discouraged if you end up with things that look like this in your garden. It happens to everyone, so just keep going and add this to the compost pile to feed the rest of your garden moving forward. Alright, so those are the 7 things that you need to know before starting your garden in order to have a successful garden and to make sure that you are having fun in your garden. You're not going to always get it right. I have not always gotten it right, but definitely going step by step and progressing and getting better every season is part of the process. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.